Welcome to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Alan Saunders. There's no Brandon Rossai. There's no Zachary Smith. That's Nick Farabaugh. Nick, I want to start an unfounded rumor. I'm so upset that I found out about this today, but apparently last week was National Short Kings Week because it was 5'6" to 5'10". And so I'm just going to start the unfounded rumor that Smitty was celebrating Short Kings Week so hard that he had to take Monday off and could not be here with us. So we'll just hope he's recovering and we'll see him tomorrow. Today, just you and me.
Just you and me, just like it was over the weekend. Just you and me. So it's like old times. Smitty is partying very hard right now, presumably on the south side. I would assume. Maybe he was on too much of a bender after seeing Paul Skeens and what happened on Saturday. There's a lot of ways you can go with that.
I'm just very upset that I did not find out until today that last week was Short Kings Week and we did not properly celebrate with our resident Short King.
Yes, I right. Smitty is the Short King of the Steelers Now crew. So that's I don't know. What is that? You are. That's like I don't have the word right now. I know what I'm trying to think, but I don't have the word to know what that is. So it's harmful. It's harmful.
Not having recognized. Yeah. Let's move on to some football. I want to start in a dangerous place. Sometimes I want to start in the YouTube comments, and I pointed this out on Twitter today as well, but I uploaded the video of Mike Tomlin talking after the second rookie minicamp practice on Saturday. And big shout out to our photographer, Ed Thompson, for sticking around to get that video for us because I was not on the south side with you. So you were kind of flying solo there, and Ed stuck around to help us out get that video. I thought it was kind of a nothing video from Tomlin, right? Like he talked a little bit about what he looks for when he's looking at these guys, how he's kind of evaluating rookie camp, but there was not a lot of meat on that bone. That didn't stop the comment section from having massive bipolar overreactions both ways. We got one comment from the Shepherd Files that says, "This is the most talented team we've had since 2011. And then I don't know how to pronounce that. Atodaso Leahy says, "Just fire Tomlin." And then we have like Sean Evans. I feel like our defense is stacked and loaded at every level. They need to lock it on and actually get a true wide receiver too. Cool Lake says, "Love Tomlin." Michael Raines, blah, blah, blah. All canned responses. Useless noise. Win a playoff game. Am I crazy? Like, do we have two fan bases or do we have one? I feel like there is this incredible separation about the way different people have responded to this offseason. What do you make of this phenomenon? And maybe on which side does more of the truth lie in your characterization of it?
This is funny because it's not just the fans, it's the media. I told you before the show, but Colin Cowherd listed his top 5 rosters in the NFL last week, and the Steelers were on that list. And his co-host Jason McIntyre fired back and said, "I don't think they're going to win 6 games." I mean, that's crazy. So, and then you look at the betting markets, and I think one has some. I think FanDuel has them at like 7.5, and then you have another that has 8.5. I mean, that for a win total, that's like a pretty stark.
65% chance to miss the playoffs as well.
Yeah, that too, right? It's crazy. So here's what I think is happening in the Steelers fan base specifically, not just in the media or the betting books. What I think it is you have two sects of fans. I think you have one that is very excited by what Omar Khan has done, his new kind of philosophy to it, right? He's active in free agency. He's willing to make trades. He's willing to kind of shake up the roster. The Steelers have a ton of overturn on their roster. I mean, there is no doubt about that. This is a very new team. So there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new talent coming in. So whenever that happens, especially when you have two guys at the quarterback position that are going to be competing for that job and are coming in, you are going to have a ton of hype, right? There's not like, okay, if you didn't believe in Kenny Pickett or Matt Canada, whatever, there's not really a figure yet that is like a malevolent figure in Pittsburgh. No one has any ill will yet towards Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or Arthur Smith for that matter. So there's that fact. And then I think there's the other, which is they don't won a playoff game since 2016. So who cares what happens in the offseason? I want to see what happens on the field. That's the other kind of point of view, I think, is when you get these fire Tomlin or these who cares about the offseason, show me whatever, right? It's who cares what they add. They're not going to win. Like, that's really what it feels like. So it's like the ultimate pessimist, the ultimate optimist. And as we always say, I think the truth lies in the middle here. I think there is – I don't – first of all, I think it's crazy to think this is the most talented roster since 2011. Since 2020, I'll agree with you. I think it's the most talented roster they've had since 2020, which is the last time they won the division. I'll agree with that. But it's not more talented than, say, 2016 when that was the height of the Killer Bees. Now, they lost to Jacksonville that year, but that was a bona fide Super Bowl contending team despite the secondary questions. So that's a little crazy. But I also don't think, for example, 6 wins. I mean, that's a little bit crazy on the pessimist side. Is it within the realistic possibility of outcomes? Sure. Is 13-4 also in the realistic possibility of outcomes? Probably. But where's the middle lie? 10-7? Like, that's where I'm feeling it right now. If I were a betting man, I would bet them to go over their win amount, which is 8.5. Certainly at 7.5, I would take them to go over. But there's just a lot of different things kind of coalescing together. There's this storm of new, which is player, which is the new OC. You have Omar Khan doing new things as the general manager that you're not used to seeing as a Steelers fan. And then on top of it, you have this stability on the coaching staff, which is Mike Tomlin's been here forever. You know Mike Tomlin. You know what his teams are going to look like. You know kind of what you're getting with Mike Tomlin. And so that's why I think you get these two different kind of brands, because the new, it's fun, but also you have that stability, and you know Mike Tomlin and what he brings to the table.
I'm going to take a moment to strongly object with the characterization of, they haven't won a playoff game since 2016. This is the least meaningful thing that Steelers fans talk about on a regular basis, period. You're meaning to tell me that if the Steelers had been a little bit worse in the regular season and needed to win a wild card game before they got to lose to the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2017, you would somehow feel differently about this franchise right now? Do you mean to tell me that they had beaten the Cleveland Browns in that wild card game in 2020 and then just went on to lose badly to the Chiefs the next week anyway, that you would feel any different about this team? Like, the people that have that mindset do not care about winning one playoff game anyway. Like, these are the people that are upset that the Steelers have not won a Super Bowl since 2008 and winning one playoff game. Or how about this? The people that say fire Tomlin and that say that harp on they haven't won a playoff game since 2016. If the Steelers had played in and won a wild card playoff game every single year since 2016, but had gone 0-8 in the divisional round since then, they would still feel exactly the same way about this team right now. They would not be even 1/1,000,000th of 1% happier about the Pittsburgh Steelers at this moment. And I'm not saying those people are wrong to have a Super Bowl or bust mindset. The Steelers have certainly earned that level of faith from their fan base, but I think the focus, not like the hyper, oh my God, they haven't won a playoff game. If the Steelers get in the playoffs and they end up with like a pretty decent seed and they play some bottom, like the Jaguars or the Chargers sneak in or something like that, and they win the wild card, and then they go to Buffalo in the second round, they lose by 30, no one should feel any better about where this team is, right? The Steelers are not a Super Bowl contender. They are not. Like, they are not a Super Bowl contender. They don't have the quarterback to be a Super Bowl contender in a conference chock full of quarterbacks. So if your idea of whether you're optimistic or pessimistic about the Pittsburgh Steelers is focused solely on winning a Super Bowl, then I think you're right to be pessimistic. And I think there are a lot of those people out there. I also think there are a lot of people that see these positive changes, that think that back-to-back super well-regarded draft class. Go find me an analyst that has had one bad thing to say about the Steelers draft class this year. Like, you literally cannot find one. It's been almost universally lauded from top to bottom. PFF going out of their way to go all over the Steelers today, of all people, should tell you exactly what the consensus is of this draft class. And yeah, I mean, I think there's plenty to be excited about. If you are, it's all about your perception, right? Are you willing to accept a step forward as a win? Or do you not care unless it results in Super Bowl? Because look, until that man in Kansas City is not there anymore, the Steelers are not going to be Super Bowl favorites. Like, period. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Like, it's another. The Steelers have had in their conference in the last 30 years. Maybe this is a controversial take. Probably the two most dominant quarterbacks of all time. I mean, certainly, like in terms of their separation from the field of at the time, you could almost make an argument that Patrick Mahomes is farther from second place right now than Brady ever was. Like, there's nobody else. Like, it's that dude. And so, yeah, they're not going to be Super Bowl contenders. Probably not anytime soon. That doesn't mean that you can't be excited about positive things that have been happening. The team is better. I think that's pretty clear. And it's weird, though, because like you pointed out, the betting markets, I think this team is a lot better than the team that we saw on the field in Jacksonville just a couple months ago, but they're projected to be much worse. I have a hard time driving that. What in your opinion is driving the betting market part of this?
It's tough. I think part of it is that a lot of people will look back at their wins last year and look at how lucky they got. I think that was part of it. Just of how close a lot of their wins were. Like Green Bay, for example, with how many turnovers they forced there. The slog they won in Pittsburgh against Cleveland in week 2. I mean, that was a crazy game to win, right?
The game that Baltimore's receivers just
right.
had their controllers disconnect.
Exactly. So, like, I think a lot of people look at that and don't see sustainable. But it's a completely different team. I mean, completely different team. It's not the same team at all. They've upgraded at quarterback. Even if you don't believe in Justin Fields and Russell Wilson, respectfully, they have upgraded at quarterback. Again, you might not believe in Arthur Smith. I think he has his issues. He's better than Matt Canada. Like, if even they went from just bad to mid, they're better. Like,
yeah.
And I think there's potential for those guys that we're talking about to be good. I think that they could be average or above average. Like, I think there's potential for that. So I don't think that's obviously in the dungeon. I think the corner room is better than it was last year. I know that Dante Jackson, again, not a star. It's not like, wow, this is the long-term answer, but he's better than Levi Wallace and Patrick Peterson. He is. Deshaun Elliott's better than Keanu Neal. Patrick Queen's better than anyone they had in the linebacker room last year. They have upgraded the offensive line with Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier. They're going to have a better center than they did last year. And I think they're going to have a better left tackle than they did last year and right tackle. I think that tackle room is going to be better. So I think they've upgraded like across a lot of positions. Now, where did they get worse? Wide receiver right now, but there's a lot of time to still add to that room. So I think,
and that's really the only place, right? Is there anywhere else you could even like? Who else are they missing?
Right, slot corner and D line.
Slot corner. I guess, yeah.
And defensive line, I think, is another question.
It didn't get worse.
They didn't get worse at defense. Well,
it didn't get better, but it didn't get worse.
I think they did get a little worse at defensive line. I just prefer Armand Watts to Dean Lowry, but even still, right?
But they're going to have Cam Hayward for
right. Cam Hayward's going to be back. We'll kind of see, but it's not like an obvious like gaping hole. So they've upgraded a lot of positions across the roster. Heck, they upgrade punter and kick returner if you really want to go even that far, right? Cordero Patterson's one of the best kick returners in the game of football. Cameron Johnson's better than Presley Harvin.
Yeah.
I mean, like, really, they've upgraded there. So, and even at wide receiver, like, okay, they haven't upgraded the 2, but Roman Wilson as a 3 is better than Allen Robinson was as a 3. And I think the combination of who's going to be 4 and 5 is going to be better than what they had last year at 4 and 5. So they'll be deeper there. If they can add a legit 2, that'll be probably, it might be a better room. We'll see who they end up adding. So that team, got lucky last year. I understand. Like, really, you look at how it kind of played. They played a style of football that really kind of chained out wins, and some of it was luck. Some of it was just a style they knew that they had to win with. But this year, theoretically, they shouldn't be much worse record-wise. I think they have a tougher schedule on paper this year, just because they have, Kansas City's on the docket. I think Atlanta's a better team than they were last year. Like, it's not an easy schedule, but we really don't know what the schedule's going to end up looking like. You can look at all those preseason strength of schedule stuff, but heck, you think a team that's really good could be really bad, and that game looks like an easy game, or the vice versa. So I think a lot of it is just the fact that the betting markets view the Steelers as having the fourth best roster in the AFC North. The AFC North is largely regarded as the best division in football.
And has a very difficult non-conference, non-divisional schedule this year.
Yes, I think that's another thing too. But I mean, listen, I think they're a better team overall. I think they have won inside the division at will recently. I mean, that's the one thing, if you are harping on that, you can't really criticize. They have beaten Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Cleveland with pretty regular success in the 2020s. They have the best record in the division since 2020. So it is pretty clear that they have been able to win in this division. The Ravens, in particular, who have been probably, it's either them or the Bengals, who have been the best team over that span, have just not been able to beat the Steelers with or without Lamar Jackson. So really, I think that's, the kind of conceptual idea is the Steelers are the fourth best roster in the AFC North, the best division in football. They have a tough non-conference schedule, so they're going to only win like 8 or 9 games. And again, that's subjective. Do they have the fourth best roster in the division? I think you can argue they have the third or second. Like, I think you can. You can go team by team. I think
they do have the worst roster.
Like last year, they clearly had the fourth. I think the gap between them and every other team has significantly.
It's not as significant. Like, I think Cleveland is really, I mean, like, depending on how Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb look coming back from injury, if they aren't the same guy, then I think Cleveland is, plus their whole offensive line, right? They have so many players coming back from injury that if they don't all come back the same, I think it's very questionable.
I don't think it's hard at all to argue.
Cincinnati's getting Joe Burrow back.
It's not hard to argue they have a better roster than Cleveland.
It's not. It's not. And Cincy, I think, is a pretty big stretch with Burrow back there.
I think so too, but I mean, I think if you had a significant gap before the injuries last year with Cincinnati and Baltimore, the talent gap is not that large between those teams anymore. It's really not. So the Steelers won't be winning on fluky stuff, if you consider it fluky stuff, right? They won't need the Ravens receivers to drop 20 passes just to win at home against them. I think they can legitimately go out and kick the Ravens behinds up front and like run it down their throat next year. Like, I believe that the Steelers are a far more talented team than they were last year. So tougher schedule maybe. I also think the amount of new they're going to have offensively is probably going to take a little bit to get used to.
Yeah, I could see that.
So they could start out a little slow. So that's possible. But I think it's a better team than it was last year. And
I don't think it has the big bad failure codes either, right? Like the Burrows, if Burrow gets hurt, the Bengals are hosed, right? If Lamar gets hurt, the Ravens are sunk. The Steelers have 2 quarterbacks who I don't even know which one is going to play, but certainly if either one of them gets hurt, it's not like the other one is likely to be a lot worse. Najee Harris has Jalen Warren there. They've been without one or more of Minka Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, and TJ Watt for all the last 2 seasons. Like, and they've still been very good on defense. And so, like, where is the big bet? Those win totals have that failure. But there isn't one for the Steelers. Like, George Pickens, is he like the least replaceable guy on the roster right now?
I think he would be the one that you could like not lose right now.
Yeah.
Again, I think we all fully expect them to add a receiver. I think that's going to happen. Yeah. So, like, that's probably going to happen. So you alleviate that. I will say this too. You talk about their 3 stars on defense, which is Hayward, Watt, and Fitzpatrick right now. Well, now they have a 4th star on defense now with Queen. And they might have 2 more this year. We'll see what Joey Porter Jr. and Keanu Benton can do. But there's a very real potential for those 2 to go from really good player to star. I mean, JPJ was flirting with it already. But if he comes out next year and does the same stuff he did, he's going to be a star corner. And they're going to have 5, 6 stars on that defense. That defense could be better than it was last year. I fully believe that they're going to be better defensively.
And they were, 6th in scoring?
So, but they allowed a ton of yards, right? They allowed a ton of yards, but they made the hay in the red zone with the turnovers. I think it's going to be harder to drive on them this year. So I think they'll force more punts. And with the Steelers' kind of idea of how they're going to play, which is run the ball a lot, explosives off play action, over the top, it's going to work well because if the Steelers can get stops and get those short fields for the defense, for the offense, like that's how they're going to win games and kind of chain you down.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the win total is badly misguided. I can understand the questions about the playoffs because if you really do think that they're not the best team in the division or that they're like the least talented team in the division, then they're probably going to be in like a tough place tiebreaker wise. Where like, yeah, could they be 9-8 or 10-7 and miss the playoffs? Yeah, okay, I can see that as possible, right? Like that seems like a pretty common outcome in the range of outcomes, but man, like a win total at 7.5 just seems bonkers to me. I think people should be a lot more optimistic than that. But again, to sort of circle back to the original point, if all you care about is winning the Super Bowl, being better than 7.5 wins is probably not doing anything for you.
I agree with that. But I also think, I think the stat that is just the stat that signifies the frustration. Like, I think there's some ethos behind that kind of energy, right? It's not just the fact that they haven't won a game since 2016 in the playoffs. Like, sure, that's the stat that signifies where they are right now. But I think it's the monotony since 2020, really, which is okay, kind of this average team slogs along, slightly makes the playoffs, gets blown out. Like there hasn't been progress. So I think that's the better argument, right? It's not okay. They haven't won a playoff game since 2016. Obviously, you want to get that off your back. Like they've talked about that this offseason. Art Rooney has talked about getting that off their back, right? Win a playoff game. Okay. But just because they win a playoff game doesn't mean the direction is going in the right direction, right? Just because they beat, as you mentioned, maybe a team that is inferior to them, even that does not make the direction perfectly clear. But I think what you really need to kind of see to signify frustration with the team is it's the same story. Like we've seen the same story 5 times, right? It's the same thing. Okay, you make the playoffs, cool. You get blown out in Buffalo. You make the playoffs, cool. You get blown out in Kansas City. Like that, it's the same stuff, right? I think that's where you're going to see a benchmark here. Like, okay, let's say the Steelers, for example, this season make the playoffs as the 7th seed, but have to go to Arrowhead, but lose that game 31-28 on a game-winning field goal. You feeling better about where the team's going than if they got blown out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I think
and conversely, okay, if let's say that the Steelers go 15-2 and get a bye into the second round, and the team that they play after getting a bye in the second round is the Chiefs, who spent 4 weeks without Patrick Mahomes this week, and they lose at Arrowhead. Oh, well, they didn't, or they lose a home game to Mahomes Magic in the last drive. Like, oh, maybe they're not better, but they're close to, like, you can win a playoff game and it can be meaningless, and you can not win a playoff game and still show that you've gotten a lot closer to that ultimate goal. Like those two things are not really that related. Like there's been 7 and 9 teams that have won playoff games. Like winning a playoff game does not signify in and of itself that you are any closer to your ultimate goal.
I agree with that. I think that, listen, I think the frustration with the 2016 stat is there's just been missed opportunity, right? All right, the Killer Bees era.
Yeah, should have won the Jacksonville game. Should have beat Cleveland at home. Absolutely.
So Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger wasted that great offense. Okay, then you had an all-time great defense, like defensive nucleus, right? Where you have this real special edge rusher and TJ Watt, and then you have Minka come in, and then you have Cam still in his prime. And you lose, like, because the offense sucks now. Like, the secondary cost them against Jacksonville. And then you kind of see the opposite, the offense. And then Ben's gone, and you still don't have the quarterback answer. So it feels like the franchise, since 2016, since they lost in Jacksonville, has just been spinning its wheels in mud. That's what that stat signifies to me as much as anything. Like, you got to put context on that stat just to say, okay, they haven't won a game since 2016. Well, why haven't they won that game since 2016? It's because a combination of bad drafting, a combination of a gaping hole somewhere on the roster, bad offensive coordinator hires. Like, you can place this all into some bucket, right?
And frankly, some poor performances by some of their better players in big games.
Right.
Well, let's be honest. Like those last couple playoff opportunities, Ben Roethlisberger was not the best player on the field for the Pittsburgh Steelers, like they needed him to be.
I mean, look at the Cleveland game.
Yeah,
Marquise Pouncey snaps it over Ben's head.
Borderline Hall of Fame. 2 borderline Hall of Famers start. One Hall of Famer and a borderline Hall of Famer start the Steelers 7 points in the hole.
Right. It's just this conglomeration. And again, it's just like there's different issues with each of these teams, right? Early on in the Killer Bees, it was the secondary. They couldn't draft cornerbacks or safeties for their lives. And it got wasted. Then after that, Ben started to decline. The offensive line fell apart because DeCastro was gone, Villanueva's gone, Pouncey's gone. They try and kind of mishmash this thing together for one last run. It doesn't really work, even though they made the playoffs, get blown out. Then they miss on the quarterback pick in 22. Like, that's what it is. The direction of the franchise hasn't gone upward. It's kind of just stayed like this. They haven't fallen off the crater, but it's stayed stagnant. And there's part of that, which is Kevin Colbert's fault because the drafting has been poor, but Mike Tomlin also has to bear a brunt of that. He's made the bad, part of that's the OC hires. Part of that is, why didn't you develop personnel with better? Like, some of it is on him, right? So it's all this like cycle. And that's why if you're on the negative side of that, you look past all those failures and say, why should I be excited about this team? Because what's going to happen this year, right? And there's no certain answer quarterback. So you can't say, okay, you can cover up. For example, the Chiefs last year had an awful wide receiver room, but who cares? They have Patrick Mahomes. Like, that guy covers a lot of your holes. So you don't have that to latch onto. But I think just as easily, optimistically, it feels like the rest of the team is starting to go in the right direction. Like, let's think about the young nucleus that they are building with Pickens and Joey Porter Jr. and Benton and, Broderick Jones. And then you hopefully add Fautanu and Frazier and all these other guys to it. Like, you're building a young nucleus for a team that can go into the future, even if it's missing the quarterback piece that for certain is there. At least they took 2 upside swings this offseason at the position.
Yeah. And yeah, again, like, I think it's hard to talk about the Steelers like Super Bowl contenders without the quarterback position sort of settled in a way that it is not. But I think you can still like everything they're doing and beyond that. And I don't see a lot of reason. Let's put it this way. You're right about the churning and those feelings, but it's hard not to notice the positive trajectory of the last 2 off seasons and how this team has continued to get better. And I think if you're not seeing that, you're missing something. That's for sure.
Look back at the draft since 2018, really. I mean, that's what you look at and just say what Omar Khan inherited was not a lot of talent. Like, they had upper tier stars, but he really had.
No, it was a bad football team since
right.
Even the 2020 year was like all smoke and mirrors. Like, there was not a lot of talent there. It was just Ben Roethlisberger, chicken wire, duct tape, and bubble gum. Like that. That's what that was.
Yeah, I mean, listen. So that's really what you look at. Like, he had a big project ahead of him, man. I mean, the fact that they got to the playoffs and nearly did in 20, 21 making the playoffs with that team. You look back at who was on that team, and you're like, I mean, it was star laden in terms of the defensive performances, and that's really what got him there. So the overall roster is starting to kind of come into view. Now, they obviously have upgrades to make to fix the whole thing for the future, right? To be a true Super Bowl contender, like, they got to find the quarterback. They got to find the long-term running mate to Joey Porter Jr. on the other side. Like, they have this, but they also have some nice
tackles. Pieces. Yeah, but they've got the pieces. Like, they've got a lot of the pieces. A lot of the pieces.
They have a young emerging wide receiver, a young emerging corner, a star, 2-star edge rushers. Alex Highsmith certainly has, I think, earned himself that. A promising defensive lineman, multiple young offensive linemen now. I mean, they have guys that you can like point to and be excited about for the future. So you are seeing that, but see it on the field now. I think this is a year to see, like, okay, where does this thing go, right?
Yeah. Give me keep the comments coming about that. I want to know what you feel. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the Steelers right now? And why do you feel that way? And has anything that has happened this offseason caused you to change your opinion? Nick, before we get out of here, I want to talk about some news. The Steelers did sign Anthony Averett he was at a rookie camp as a tryout since the last time you and I were here on this channel. What were your impressions of Averett, and what kind of role do you see him having for this team? He's not that slot guy that they've kind of been missing, right?
Yeah, kind of interesting. Can play all over the formation. He can play in the slot, which I think is interesting. He plays outside and inside. I always thought if they drafted a guy, it made a lot of sense to get an inside-out guy because they still have depth questions on the outside. I know they have a lot of bodies there with Watts and Trice and Rush, but a certain guy that can do that, I think could be nice. Vet, and I think they have that now in Averett, who is kind of just a guy that right, can play outside. Now he's had some injuries that have hampered him over his career, but he's kind of got a slot cornerback type of frame to him. He's fluid in and out of his breaks. He's got some nice ball production, so he's a guy that can create turnovers. So this is a guy that I think you throw in the slot competition, but can he give you outside versatility? Like that's what I view him as. So I think he's a nice blanket to kind of have in that room because they really only had two contenders for that slot job with it, which is Beanie Bishop and Josiah Scott. Well, now Averett adds a third to that. I think there will be another guy coming, a fourth guy probably coming into that. Probably one of the former Steelers in free agency, Cam Sutton, Patrick Peterson, or Shannon Sullivan. I think one of those three will come back to make the fourth guy in that slot room to kind of compete for that job. But I think, Averett, his last really fully healthy season was 2021. And it was a good year. He played really well for the Ravens when they needed him to that year, but since has just, broke his thumb, had hamstring, groin injuries, shoulder injuries, like a lot of injuries, probably scared a lot of teams away. But if he can stay healthy, I think there is some upside to kind of see here, even though Averett's 29. He's got a lot of experience. You know him from the divisional rivalries with the Ravens. He's a really kind of competitive player, so he'll come up and tackle too. So I think he's a good kind of mesh to that room to at least bring in a truly tried vet that can really compete with those young guys.
I think so too. The Steelers released offensive tackle Kellen Diesch today. I looked at the roster and saw 16 offensive linemen, and that is just one more than you need. So I kind of figured coming out of this that one would be getting gone, but that makes 3 open spots on the 90-man roster now. Anybody else that was at rookie camp on a tryout catch your eye that you think might be signing a contract in these next couple of days?
Well, I do think Jonathan Ward, one of the other veteran tries at running back, could potentially do that. I still think, we could be looking at one more running back ad for them. They kind of came in very bare at the position. So I think Ward is interesting because he's a highly skilled special teamer that played wing, gunner, and returner before, has been on coverage units. So I think he fits in with the new mold. Very good pass protector and receiving back. So kind of gives you a different type of skill that, say, a guy like Dejon Edwards isn't totally known for. So kind of different vet guys. He also took, I think, very quickly to what Eddie Faulkner was doing. Eddie Faulkner seemed pretty impressed with him. I think he's a guy to kind of pay attention to in that room. I also, I'm kind of wondering what they're going to do on the defensive side of the ball. I think they could still use another corner to add there. Again, I think it's going to be one of the 3 former Steelers, but maybe you sign a camp tryout like a Marquez Williams who, showed a lot to kind of differentiate himself from the crowd. So again, with these rookies, it's always tough to kind of tell who stands out. Just watching them go through walkthrough. I'm looking for physical traits, but the Steelers aren't. They're looking for more like mental retention and conditioning. So I have different priorities because I haven't watched Johnny Hudson, for example. I don't know what the guy's
tape is. Big dude, Johnny Hudson.
He's huge. So okay, defensive line depth, maybe he could be an interesting name because I think he's a really big guy and can play up and down the line. So he's kind of what they like there. So he could be an interesting name too. But I think, I think most of their ads, I think they have 3 open spots. I think all 3 of them might end up being, I'm not even sure if they'll be rookie camp signings. I think some of them might be free agent signings. Like one could go to Marcus Golden, right? One could go to Cam Sutton, and the other one could be your wide receiver too. Like that could be very real.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Like that's where I'm thinking. So, I mean, they signed Averett right away. Usually they sign them either the day after or the day after that. So this is the day after that, Monday. So I think if we don't see you guys signed by the end of Tuesday, I think you could probably say Averett was probably only signing of the crop, and you can start turn the wheels towards free agency. Usually by OTAs, they have 90 or at least 89 on the roster.
They can have 91 this year because Welshoff is German and has a roster exemption. So
correct. So they will have 91 this year, but they were in on Bud Dupree, which tells me they're looking at that edge market. I think at this point in the offseason, the obvious thing to do is just to call up Marcus Golden and bring him back. If you really
there's a bunch of edges out there though that are really good. So I mean,
whatever,
just find one. I mean,
right. I like
Marcus out there. Tyus Bowser's out there. Like there's lots of good players. I really like Marcus Golden, but it's not like the pool is thin there beyond.
Right,
him.
He's not the only one, but I would probably just bring back Golden for familiarity. Like they don't really need a special teamer because Herbig's going to play special teams, and I think they might keep 5 this year. Moon might be the 5th. That can be a special teamer too.
Or they'll keep 5 inside linebackers, and Mark Robinson will be the guy. I mean, one way or the other, they have the body there.
Right. They have a guy. They can add a guy that's just pure pass rush.
Or they'll keep 5 safeties in it's Trenton Thompson. Like one way or the other, they're getting that extra special teamer from that defense. So, you don't need your 3rd outside linebacker, 4th outside linebacker to both be core special team.
Exactly. So so Golden is kind of a good add, I think, to the room. Again, I can see them. Wide receiver is the big albatross. I still think that's going to take training camp time, and like makes sense to me. Everyone that's tied up in the trade market is contract related, so that stuff's
certainly at least until June 1. I think I would not expect any news on that front for a while. I'm sure we're going to keep talking about it. Until then, Smith will be back tomorrow. Nick, thanks for joining us. Tell the people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, you could find me on X, Twitter at Farabaugh FB. We're working on a lot of stuff. Some stuff from rookie minicamp. We're gonna write some stuff up about everybody that at least was there. That includes the UDFAs that were there as well. And then we're gonna start to prepare for OTAs. OTAs are not far away. What are they? 9-10 days away, right? Next Tuesday.
8 days next Tuesday.
Yeah, so almost a week away from OTAs. So we'll be gearing up for that. That'll probably be the first time we talk to like Justin Fields and Dante Jackson and Russell Wilson and all those guys.
And make sure you like and subscribe. To the YouTube channel here. Click the bell for notifications. All kinds of stuff coming. We got lots of videos coming from the rookie mini camp. Troy Fautanu is just one video up on the channel here. I've got a whole bunch in the can. Peyton Wilson and Zach Frazier and Beanie Bishop and they're Roman Wilson. They're all coming. And so over the next couple of days. But so make sure you do that. And then SteelersNow.com. And that's it. We'll see Smitty tomorrow. Nick, thanks for joining us. And until then, we'll take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.